What I'm going to do now is create a report based on the AdventureWorks LT 2012 database. The report's going to display AdventureWorks products by category. When I'm finished with the report, I'll use Report Builder to deploy it to our report server. Okay, so I'll start by starting Report Builder. Fire that up. As you can see, it's connected to the Win7 Dev report server. Win7 Dev is the name of the machine that I'm working on right now. So it's going to connect to the local host, but you can set the default connection for Report Builder to any server that you want. All right, here within Getting Started, New Report is already selected, and I'm going to use this Table or Matrix Wizard option. And this is going to fire up a wizard that'll step us through the process of creating the report. Now, in this environment, I don't have any data sets in the report or any shared data sets. So I need to create a data set. So I'll leave this selected, but if I had any existing data sets, I could choose them there and build a report on that data. All right, so the first thing I need to do is create a data source connection. I don't have any in my environment yet, otherwise they'd be listed here. So I'll click on the New button. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is name the data source AdventureWorks LT. It's common to name a data source after the database that's connecting to, but you can name it whatever you want, whatever makes sense for you in the report. I can then select the connection type. I'm going to use SQL Server, but as you can see, there's a number of other options of places where I can get data for the report. And then I'm going to create the connection string. So I can either click in the box and type in the connection string if I remember all the parameters and all the property values and everything that I want to do. Or, more conveniently, I can click on the Build button to open up this Connection Properties dialog box. So I'll start by typing in the Win7 Dev server name. And again, I can connect to any server that I want, localhost or whatever. I'll use Windows Authentication, so that works within this environment, but if I needed to use SQL Server Authentication, I can make that selection and enter a username and password. And then I need to select the database. So because I have correct authentication set here, it goes out and gives me a list of all of the databases installed on that server. Okay, in this case, that's all I need to do in order to create this connection. But I can also click on the Advanced button there and set various other properties for this connection. But again, I don't need to do any of that here. I'll test the connection. Everything looks good. That's particularly important if you're providing a username and password. Make sure that you didn't make a typo in the username or in the name of the server if you typed it in. Click on OK and click on OK there. Okay, and as you can see, it created the connection string that I needed, and I'm all set to go. Now, one other thing that you may need to do is use this credentials page here. This lets you set login credentials for connecting to the report server. These are used when you save the report to the server, not to access the data used in the report. By default, the credentials are set to the current user. So in that case, that's me. But you can also store username and password or prompt for them when accessing the report server. Okay, and if you click the Test Connection button in the Data Source Properties pane, that'll go back to in just a second, and you get an access error, you either need to restart Report Builder and run it as an administrator, or make changes here within the Credentials pane. Okay, I don't need to do that. I have all the proper permissions, or at least I hope I do. We'll see when we try to deploy it. Okay, if I'm really paranoid, I can do Test Connection, unable to connect to the data source. I would need to verify the credentials, and insufficient. And I'm going to ignore that error because that should be okay when we deploy based on my connection to the Win7 Dev. Yeah, let me just go back in. Yeah, I specified Win7 Dev. I can connect. Okay, so hopefully it's going to work when we actually deploy the report. Otherwise, we might need to come back in here and tweak these properties. Okay, I'll click on OK, and now the new data source connections appears within the list. Okay, so let's move on. Now it's time to design the query that will be used to access the data from that database that we just defined. So what you need to do here is define the data that you want to use in the report. The nice thing about it is that the designer understands the database schema in the data source, including the relationships between tables, which makes it easy to build report queries. Okay, so for this report, we want to return a list of the AdventureWorks products, including their name, product number, and list price, as well as the product category that it's assigned to. This means that the query has to do a join between the product and the product category entities in the database. Now, if you were to write a SQL query to do that, it would look something like select 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fields from salesLT.product, inner join on the product category table with an on clause that matches up the foreign key, the primary key and the foreign key for the product and product category table. Okay, but because we're using a designer, I don't have to write any SQL code, and the process is pretty simple. All right, so the first thing I want to do is expand the sales LT schema. I want to use tables, so I'll expand those. And then here's that product table. So I'll expand the product table because I want to select the name, the product number, the list price, and just those 3 fields, in order to include them in the query. And as you can see, it adds those to the selected fields list in the right part of this designer. All right, now I want to go to the product category table, and here select the name field. And that also gets added to the list. Now, one of the things that the designer does automatically is that I now have 2 fields called name, one from the product table and one from the product category table. And so what the designer did is it automatically concatenated on, or actually to the front of the name, added the table name from which that field came from. So that makes it nice to distinguish between those 2 fields. All right, I can test the query by executing it there and expand some of these and product category name. And there you can see we have a number of products, the product number, the list price, and the product category name. So we have a number of mountain bikes and road bikes and touring bikes and handlebars and forks and all the different parts of the bicycle. Okay, now one of the things about these query results is that the field names aren't probably the best. This first column, product name, is probably fine because remember it concatenated the table name onto the field name and left a space. And that's probably going to work for most reports. This doesn't have a space here. List price doesn't have a space. And product category name, well, that just kind of clunky. Now there isn't an easy way to make these kinds of changes within the designer, but you can directly edit the query used to generate the results. So what I can do is click here on Edit as Text, and I can change some of the names. So I'm going to add aliases. So I'm going to call this product number. And list price as list price. And I'll just add a space there. Okay, so those are going to be much better field names for use within the report. All right, I can click on this red button there, and you can see the results. And so you can continue to tweak the query until it meets your requirements. And in fact, you can directly, if you want to directly edit the SQL in more complex ways, you can add more joins, filters using where clause, whatever you want to do in order to make the query work to get you the data for the report. All right, once you're happy with it, you can click on Next and move on. Oh, actually, one other thing about this is that if you do come over here and edit as text, and then click this button again to return to the designer, you get this warning. And it says, switching to the Visual Designer will discard your manual changes to the query. Do you want to use the Visual Designer anyway? Well, you can click yes, in which case you'll go back to your original query that you designed using the designer, or no to stay here in editing as text. So just be aware that it's not a full round trip kind of a thing. It's not going to pick up the different changes that you've made and apply them within the designer. Just one of the limitations of this particular designer. Okay, so I'll click on no there, and once again click next. All right, so here on the Arrange Fields page, you can add fields as row groups, column groups, and values. How you arrange the fields is going to determine whether the wizard configures a table or matrix on the report. Now in this sample report, I'm going to group the rows by the product category name and display all of the other fields in the body of the table. Okay, so I'm going to start by dragging this product category name to the row groups box here. And then I'm going to put the rest of the fields in the values box. One other thing that you can do here within the values is you can click this drop-down list and perform any kind of aggregations that you want, at least the ones that are supported within Report Builder. So I can sum, average, get the maximum, minimum, and so forth. And notice that the wizard saw that this is a numeric value, list price, and so it automatically used a summation for the list price field. And I'll show you how you can change that later. All right, that's good for now, so I'll click on next, we'll move on. Okay, now because I included at least one field to group on, remember the product category name, this Choose the Layout page appears. This lets you set up a basic page layout, giving the option of showing product category subtotals and grand totals, as well as whether the groups are blocked or stepped. That's just a kind of a layout arrangement thing. And whether the subtotals should appear on the line with the product category name or at the end of the list of products. Okay, so I'm going to leave selected the Show Subtotals and Grand Totals, and then select the Blocked Subtotal Above option. So now you can see that that subtotal here has moved to the top. And then I'm also going to leave enabled the Expand Collapse Groups so that the user can expand and collapse the product category group items. That can be a handy way for the user to be able to navigate around different objects or different rows of data within the report. So it definitely would be worthwhile to experiment with each of these options with your own data to see how it affects how the report is generated. All right, so I'll click on Next. Now we can choose a style. In this case, you need to select a predefined style that appeals to you. All right, I'm going to go with the default Ocean, but you can select Corporate, and Forest, and Generic, and Mahogany, and Slate as well. Okay? I have no idea why Ocean is the default, but somebody in the reporting services team apparently likes it, or at least the report builder team. Now, keep in mind that once you're done with the wizard and the overall report is designed, you can make changes to the appearance. So you're not locked into anything that you're doing here. Okay, so I'll click on Finish, and now it generated the report for me. And as you can see, I end up back in the Report Designer view. All right, I want to add a title, so I'll click there as instructed, and I'll name this AdventureWorks Products by Category. But you can name it anything that you want. Okay, I'll select the box, and I'll change the font to Arial. Not all that big a change, but works for me. And it also makes it a little bit smaller so it fits within that space. Not a big deal. But I can also change the font size up here on the ribbon as well. All right, so I have the basic beginnings of a report. So now what I can do is preview it. So I'll click on the Run button here. Failed to preview the report. Okay, so the reason why this appeared is that I failed to run Report Builder as an administrator. So, I can save as. I'm going to come out and save it to my computer. I have a samples here, and I will save it to that location. All right, and then now what I need to do is close down Report Builder, come back over here, right-click on it, and this time run as administrator. Okay, so then I can open saved report, put in my computer, C, samples, and there's my report, and open it back up, and hopefully that will solve that problem. So I'll run it. All right, goes out, grabs the data that's required, applies the template that I just created, essentially the report definition, and after a few moments, displays the report. Now, keep in mind, that took a relatively long time to generate the report. I'll talk a little bit later in the course about some of the features in Report Builder that speed that up. But this is the first time that I did just about anything in SQL Server within reporting services, and it had to go out and get the data for the first time, as well as combine the data with the template. So typically, from here on in, it's not going to take as long for the report to appear. But like I said, I'll talk more about that later. All right, so because of the selections that I made, I can come here and expand the different categories and see the products that are included in each category. So there are some bike stands, we have a couple brakes, a couple crank sets. And you might recall that we had a lot of mountain bikes, and even more road bikes, as I recall. Okay, so the user can explore the report, getting a high-level view of the different categories, and then drilling down into the detail that they want to see for a particular category. All right, now there are a few refinements possible that would make this report more attractive, and I'll do that next. So let's go back over to the design view. Now, in the preview, you might have noticed that the product category name and the name columns are a bit too narrow to show those values on a single line. So I'm going to widen those by selecting the table. This is actually a table here within the report, which is actually, even below that, fundamentally a tablets control. And I can widen the columns by doing that right there. And that's probably a good first swipe. And then I can also widen the product name. Okay? And in fact, if I continue to widen this, notice that the right side of the table expands beyond the width of the report, but then when I release the mouse button, it expands it in order to accommodate that full area. Okay, now, this name here, the header name, is a bit unwieldy. It really doesn't need to say product category name, so I'm just going to shorten that to category. And I can do the same sort of thing to other fields on the report as well. All right, remember that I left the default aggregation for the list price field to be a sum. But that doesn't really make sense for prices in a product list. I suppose there might be some scenarios where it'd be interesting to know the sum of the list prices of products within a category, but not really. So what might be more useful is to have the average of that amount. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is right-click here and select Expression. This pops up this Expression dialog box. And then I'm going to change this to be average instead of sum. And I'll click on OK, and now it's changed to average there. All right, I need to do that for that cell right here as well. And then the other thing is I don't want to display the sum of list prices for each product. That just kind of doesn't make any sense. So I'll right-click on that and select Expression. And I want to get rid of the aggregation altogether. So I'm going to change that to just reference the price, list price value. And that's how I do that. Okay, do OK. And now it's just going to display the list price for each product on the row. All right, now the last refinement that I want to do is format the prices as currency. So I'll once again right-click on that first one because I have to do it for all three of those list prices. And I'm going to select Text Box Properties. Go into the Number page, and this gives me a number of different formats that I can use. So I'm going to select Currency, and then I'll accept all of the other defaults here. And I'll do this for the other two places where numbers appear that I want currency. Okay. So now I'm going to run the report again to see all the changes. All right, so first of all, let's make sure our column widths are good. They are, looks like they are for categories. Okay, that's good. Notice that the list prices are now formatted as currency with 2 decimal points. I can look at bottom brackets. There we have room enough for all the names. I would have to expand all of these to make sure that we made the product name category wide enough. Look at some mountain bikes. Yeah, those all look good. Road bikes. I've recently taken up cycling in a big way, so I'm really curious about these products. Anyway, so now that's the report. There's certainly a lot more that you could do to change and enhance the report. So you can feel free to play with this as you want to. There's ways you can add color, change formatting, add additional information, add static fields, all kinds of stuff like that. Okay, so I'm going to return to design view at this point. So I'm happy with the report. I'm now ready to deploy it to the server. So I can either select Save there. Now, unfortunately in this case, that just updated the copy that I saved locally. Okay, but I want to report it, I want to deploy it to the server. If I had just created a new report and hadn't saved it locally, then that option would open up a Save As dialog box. I already saved it in one format, so it assumes that I want to keep saving it in that same format. So what I need to do instead here is select Save As, and that reopens this Save As Report dialog box. It gives me the previous way I saved it, but now I want to come in and use a particular site. So I'm going to select the Win7Dev report server, and I want to give the report a meaningful name. So I'm going to name this Products by Category. And it'll give the extension of RDL. And I'll click on Save. Can't save here. Please choose another location. Well, not sure why I'm getting that error. Let's see. Oh, I didn't have the report server. I have to actually double click on it in order to select it. It needs to appear within the look-in. And then I have the products by category and save. Okay, user error there. Now, because of security, there's various other things that can go wrong at that point. Because what could happen is that you don't have permissions, or you don't have permission in the particular default location. So you may have to sometimes go in and use Report Manager to create a folder, change permissions and so forth, and then save a report to that particular location. So that's a security sort of thing that I don't want to get bogged down in here. But just be aware that that's the sort of thing that you may have to do. Okay, now, unfortunately, as you saw, Report Builder really doesn't give any indication of whether the deployment succeeded or failed. Although the lack of an error message is definitely a good sign. So what I want to do is open up Report Manager in a browser. So I'll come over here into Internet Explorer, and I'll go to Win7Dev and go to Reports. Does not have required permissions. And let me try localhost. Okay. That's not working, so let me start Internet Explorer. You definitely find that often you need to start these tools as administrator in order to do some of the things you want. Okay, and that succeeded. All right, now I put this in the default folder, so there's our reports by category report. If I had put it in a folder someplace, I'd have navigate down a hierarchical structure. There doesn't happen to be any sub-reports at this point. But here I can now click on that report, goes out, loads it, and displays the report within the browser. And just like within the preview, I can click on different product categories and expand them and collapse them, and I can test out the report, actually running it from the report server. So here you want to make sure that it properly deployed, all the permissions are correct, it's able to get access to the data it needs, and so forth.